Shilian said. Before he finished his sentence, he felt Hua Chang squeeze with a bit of force. Pain crawled up his leg, and he couldn't help but shrink back. Although Hua Chang's strength was already extremely controlled, and this little bit of pain was nothing to Shilian, for some reason, in front of him, Shilian seemed to be unable to hide away his pain. Maybe it was because of what Hua Chang told him beforehand, or maybe he tried too hard to hold back and it backfired on him. Sensing Shilian shrinking back, Hua Chang instantly held his ankle tighter and reassured him with a soft voice. "Don't worry, it'll be over soon. Don't be scared." Shilian shook his head, but Hua Chang's hands had become even gentler, his hand operating speedily, and when he raised it again, that tiny little needle was already extracted. "All right, it's done," Hua Chang said. Shilian focused his eyes and saw that the tip of that needle was glistening with a vicious poison. Hua Chang closed his 5 fingers and crushed it easily into a small waft of black gas, dissipating into the air. Seeing this, Shilian put aside all his discomfort and commented soberly, "What a heavy air of grudge. A typical fetus spirit shouldn't have spiritual power this strong." Hua Chang stood up. "You're right," he said. "So this fetus spirit must not be from a normal miscarriage." Just then, a masked man entered with his head down. He held a clay pot with both his hands and handed it to Hua Chang. Shilian unconsciously checked to see if that man's wrist still carried the cursed shackle. But this time, the man's sleeves were tied down fully and completely. Hua Chang took the pot with one hand and glanced at it, then turned around to pass it to Shilian, who was sitting on the black jaded divan. Shilian hadn't yet reached over, and the muffled sound of a child crying could be heard from within. It seemed something was madly knocking about, making the clay pot shake, unable to remain standing up. So Shilian became more cautious. When he took the clay pot, he peeled up a small corner of the seal and peeked in. He could feel a sense of dreadful cold rush up his spine. Inside the pot lay a puddle of something like a fetus. Although both the arms and legs were grown out, they were weak and powerless, and the head remained obscured in the shadows. All in all, it was no more than a lump of twisted organs. This was the spirit's true form. Shilian immediately resealed the pot and said, "I see." He had once heard that there were those who would search for pregnant women who hadn't yet reached term. They would cruelly cut out the children from the mother's womb, transforming the fetus into a little demon to perform spells, urging them to do harm, either to protect the spellcaster or for the protection of a dwelling and luck. By the sight of this, that fetus spirit was no doubt the product of such an evil spell. Its mother might very well have been Shilian's worshipper once. Otherwise, his protection charm wouldn't be tucked into the clothes of the child yet born. Shilian hummed and then said, "This fetus spirit was captured by you, but would Sunlang mind if I took it back with me to investigate? Because I've already bumped into it once before at Mount Yujun, this was the second time it's appeared before me. I don't know if it's a mere coincidence or if there's some kind of connection." "If you want to take it, then just take it," Hua Chang said. "Even if I didn't appear, you would still have captured it." Shilian chuckled. Be that as it may, Sunlang caught it so effortlessly, much more so than if I were to try. It was an offhand comment, but Hua Chang remarked, "Is that right? And if I didn't appear, how did you plan on capturing it? Eat it into your stomach, then swallow the sword too?" He had actually hit it right on the mark. There wasn't any trace of displeasure on Hua Chang's face, but Shilian somehow felt that maybe Hua Chang was a little mad. Instincts told him that if he didn't answer correctly, Hua Chang would become angrier. Just as he was thinking of a response, he suddenly felt his stomach shrink slightly, and without thinking, Shilian said, "I'm a little hungry." It was only after the words had left his lips that Shilian realized what he had said. Too embarrassed to see the reaction on Hua Chang's face, Shilian explained himself honestly. This time, it's true. A moment later, Hua Chang finally laughed out loud. Once he laughed, it was as if all of Shilian's gloomy clouds disappeared, and he sighed a breath of relief. Hua Chang, on the other hand, was half laughing, half sighing, and nodded his head. "All right," he said. Hua Chang had wanted to keep Shilian and set out a feast at Paradise Manor, but when Shilian heard set out a feast, he knew it'd be too big of a deal, and suggested that the two go out for a stroll and find something to eat instead. Hua Chang agreed to it. It was quite warm within Paradise Manor, and while the two entered dripping wet, they were both dry soon after. However, Shilian's dress of women's attire was awfully conspicuous, so he still borrowed a set of clothes from Hua Chang, changing back into clean white robes. Afterward, the two set out. Even after walking for quite a distance, the wailing of that fetus spirit could still be heard, the cries of "Mum" ringing in the air, demonstrating its dogged tenacity. However, there were already howls and wails of demons and ghosts all over the ghost city, so its cries were drowned within, not the least bit noticeable. The main street of the ghost city was bustling as always, and on either side of the street were stalls selling exotic foods. Although the demons and ghosts remained the same ones, their attitude towards Shilian were completely different from the last time he wandered the streets. Hua Chang walked next to him, shoulder to shoulder, and the bizarre-looking stall owners all came out to greet them with smiles, fighting each other to welcome them into their abode, bowing almost halfway. It reminded Shilian of a random idiom, the fox assuming the power of a tiger. Other than paying respects to Hua Chang, there were hundreds and thousands of eyes watching Shilian with heat, as if judging and conjecturing. Just who was he to be able to walk shoulder to shoulder with the Lord of Ghost City? This made Shilian wonder if maybe he had made another wrong decision. To be positioned in the flowing current of monsters and demons before the eyes of millions, Hua Chang seemed to be quite at home, and he asked, "What do you want to eat?" Finally, seeing a stall that was selling something that wasn't weird, Shilian wanted to end things quickly. He said, "This one's fine." However, Hua Chang said, "Not this one." "Why?" Shilian asked, curious. Hua Chang didn't say a word, but gestured for him to look inside. Shilian took a look, and when the stall owner saw them stopping before him, he rubbed his hands in excitement, as if wanting to welcome them in, nervously wiping the tables, chairs, and benches vigorously. However, what he was using to clean the furniture was his tongue. Although the bowls and cutlery were dripping with shimmering beads of water, after having been licked by that wide and long tongue, reflecting a shine that made them all look brand new, still, Shilian decided to abandon that stall resolutely, and hurried away. After a few steps, he saw another stall, a chicken soup shop that appeared cleanly put together. The sign in front of the door said, "Home-raised chicken, slow-cooked broth, made fresh, guaranteed clean." Shilian stopped. "Oh, chicken soup," he said. "How about a bowl?" Hua Chang, however, said again, "Not this one, either." Shilian blinked. "Is it a problem with the plates, or is it with the chicken?" he asked. Hua Chang brought him into the shop, pulled aside a set of curtains, and gestured for Shilian to look. Curious, Shilian poked his head in, and immediately became speechless. Inside the kitchen was an enormous pot, a roaring fire beneath it, and steam rolled out of it. Inside the pot was a large man with a bright red cockscomb on his head, and he was simmering in the boiling waters, happily taking a bath. Next to the pot were many buckets. They contained salt, pepper, herbs, and other such seasonings. In the shop's front, a customer yelled, "Boss, add more salt to the soup. It's too plain." As he bathed, the man grabbed a large handful of seasoning and smeared it on himself, rubbing it hard into his body with a towel, increasing the flavor. He then let out a long crow. She then dropped the curtains and silently walked out. After making a large round, the two finally found a shop, its speciality being authentic delicacies of the mortal realm. Although Shillian was suspicious of just how authentic it was. For example, as far as he knew, mortal chefs wouldn't use the meat of large, hard-to-hunt monsters to make skewers. Nonetheless, in comparison, the shop was the most normal. The moment the two sat down, the crowd of ghosts who had been following behind immediately approached and surrounded them, attentively soliciting to add more dishes to their meal. That hog butcher carried with him a thick, white human leg, slapping at it soundlessly, and cried with a rough voice, "My lord, do you want fresh thighs? This just came in." The crowd yelled at him, "Get out of here. Do you think the Lord's friend would eat that shit? You're taking him for the green ghost? Maybe your own thighs would be more edible. What a strong stench of blood, you disgusting people." That hog actually raised one of his peg legs and shouted, "If my lord and my lord's friend like it, my old leg is nothing. I'll butcher it. Let me tell you, meat on my old flesh is definitely full of flavor." Shillian couldn't help but smile and ate his porridge with his head down. Hua Chang ignored them pointedly, so that crowd of ghosts and demons fervently tried to push their goods onto Shillian, blabbering, "Street food speciality, brain juice, brains of monsters specially picked, each one with cultivation of over 50 years. Smell this delicious fragrance, my good sir." "This duck blood pudding is really good," said another. "Quack, look, quack. It's freshly cut from my own flesh, quack. Why don't you give it a try, quack." Our fruits are authentic fresh fruits from the graveyards. If it ain't grown on dead bodies, we won't even pick it. It's true, not a word of lie. Mountains and mountains of food were given, so much that Shillian was having trouble seeing all of it, and he thanked them endlessly. He didn't want to put down this wave of fervent affection, but at the same time, so many of those exotic street foods were really hard to accept. In the mess of things, he saw Hua Chang sitting there, his hand supporting his cheek, watching him with a big smile. Shillian looked around him, cleared his throat, then whispered in a small voice, "San Lang." Only then did Hua Chang speak up. "There's no need to mind them, Gurga. They're only overly excited because there's a guest." A ghost immediately said, "My lord, don't say that. It ain't like we get excited over just anyone. If the Lord is our granddad, then the Lord's Gurga is our grand uncle." "Yeah," shouted another. "Of course. We gotta get excited when grand uncle comes around." Shillian didn't know whether to laugh or cry, wondering what they were even saying. Hua Chang shouted, "Stop that nonsense. Shut up." The crowd of ghosts hurriedly acquiesced. "Yes, sir," they shouted. "My lord is absolutely correct. We're shutting up. It's not grand uncle." Just then, unexpectedly, a few of the female ghosts who had been giggling on the side finally couldn't hold back anymore and called out, "Hey, you! Weren't you that Dao Zhang Gurga who told Lan Chang that you couldn't get it up?" Shilin almost spat out his mouthful of porridge on the spot. It was like that crowd of ghosts had discovered a major secret, and they exploded. "Holy shit, you're right," yelled one. "It's him, it's him, it's him," said another. Lan Chang was going around telling everyone. The smarter ghosts were hastily smothering the mouths of those who were shouting. However, Hua Chang had no doubt heard. Xue Lian peeked up and saw Hua Chang cocking an eyebrow, watching him with an unreadable eye, as if trying to make sense of what Get It Up had to do with Xue Lian. Originally, that was the excuse Xue Lian had used when the female ghost had been clinging on to him, and even though he was made fun of by the crowd at the time, he could face it like it was nothing. Yet, now that it had been thrust in front of Hua Chang, Xue Lian couldn't endure it, wishing desperately that he could just choke himself to death with a mouthful of porridge. Xue Lian started to say. Hua Chang seemed to be waiting patiently for him to continue. But how could something like this possibly be explained? Was he really going to argue with a straight face that he was not, in fact, impotent? Xue Lian finished lamely. "I'm full," he said. That wasn't a lie. He really was full, so he stood up immediately and hurried out of the store. Behind him, the crowd of ghosts carried their mountains of delicacies and exotic dishes, howling non-stop. "My lord, you're not going to eat any more?" they yelled. Hua Chang ran after Xue Lian, but took a spare moment to look back. He ordered again, "Scram!" The crowd of ghosts hastily scrammed again. Ahead, Xue Lian walked randomly, but seeing that those ghosts and demons didn't follow, he slowed his pace to wait for Hua Chang. It didn't take long before Hua Chang came forward with his hands clasped behind him, speaking in a serious voice. "I didn't know Gerger had such an unspeakable affliction." Xue Lian immediately cried, "I don't." Then he lamented woefully, "Sun Lang." Hua Chang nodded. "Very well. Sun Lang understands. I won't speak another word on the subject." He put on the face of one extremely good and obedient, but was very obviously faking it. Xue Lian remarked, "You're so insincere." Hua Chang laughed. "I promise, you will not find another person who is more sincere than me in this world." Hearing that familiar response, Xue Lian also laughed. A moment later, he asked in a sobering voice, "San Lang, do you know where Qiandong Temple is?"